Hello everyone, in this video we're going to discuss another higher order function within JavaScript, and in today's video we're going to talk about the filter method. This filter method can be performed on any array within JavaScript. In the previous video I covered the for each method, and we're going to use the same dataset that we used in that video. So let's start off by creating our new file. I'm going to call my file filter.js. And now we need some data. So with our filter method, we're going to be looping through our array and we're going to be checking for some values. So for example, if we had a ages array, we might be checking to see what ages were greater than 18. If we had an array with a bunch of names, we might want to filter the names that were over 10 characters in length or something like that. But for this example, we're going to be going through salaries. So this is what we've done in our previous video. This is the code for it. So I'm just going to go and grab this here, and I'm going to paste it into my filter.js file. Now, if you haven't seen my previous video, I'm just going to go through this quickly. We've defined a variable called salary, and within our salary variable, and this variable is actually an array or a data structure, and you can see that it holds 10 values, and these 10 values represent a salary. So this is 25,000, 32,000, 50,000. So this would represent 10 different people. So in this example we have no name attached to these salaries because the main purpose of this video is to really understand the filter method itself, and we don't want to get caught up in a really complex example. So what we're going to simply do is we're going to want to filter out the results, and we want to get all the results within our salary array, which is greater than 50,000. So we're specifically saying greater than 50,000. So if you look through this array, you can see here's an example here, and this salary is exactly 50,000. So we wouldn't want to actually include this in our array. We'd want to just include 82, 65, 52, and 87. So this problem that I'm after explaining to you, we can actually do this using a for loop. Okay, so what we could do is we could loop through all the elements in salary, so 25,000, 32,000, and so on until we get to the end of the array, and we can do a check to see if that salary is greater than 50,000 to put it in a separate variable. So let's say we could define a variable. We could say let res, short for result, and set that equal to an empty array. Okay, so we could do that, and that's what we're actually going to do right now, just so you'll understand how we can solve this problem just using really simple JavaScript without introducing higher order functions. We're going to start off our for loop. So we're going to say for, and we're going to say let I. We're going to call our incrementer I. It's a standard that we usually use, and we've set it to 0. Now we want to loop through all these elements 10 times because 10 is the number of elements that we have. So we could say I is less than 10, but a better way to do this would be to get the salary length. So we can say salary dot length, because if we were to just put 10 in there, imagine we might add extra salaries in the future. Maybe then there's 12 salaries, or maybe there's 15 salaries, then our for loop here wouldn't actually work. So that's why we're using the .len method here. And then we're going to move on by incrementing our incrementer, which is called I in this example. Then we're going to put our curly braces, and within these curly braces are our actual logic, so what we want to actually do or check. So as we said before, we want to check to see if the salary is greater than 50,000. And if it is greater than 50,000, we want to add it to the result. So you can see our result array up here, and then at the end we can then print out that result array to see what our figures are. So we need to start off with a conditional statement. So the conditional statement that we're going to use here is if, and we're going to say if salary with our square brackets, and I is our incrementer, so salary I for this first iteration, so the first time we use the for loop, will be 0, so it would be checking to see if 25,000 is greater than 50. And I'm putting in 50 here, but you could change this to whatever you want. Maybe you wanted it to be lower, maybe you want it to be 40 or whatever, but for this example we're just going to say we want it greater than 50. Now after our if conditional statement, we want to set another pair of curly braces, and this is going to be what's going to happen if this condition is met. So for example, with our first iteration of our for loop, when it checks the first value, it's going to check is 25,000 greater than 50,000. It's not. So it's not going to go inside these curly brackets and execute this code, right? It's going to just skip over it, and it's going to increment the counter to 1, and then it's going to move on to the next element in the array, which is 32,000, and it's going to see if 32,000 is greater than 50. It's not. Then it's going to go to 50,000. 50,000 is still not greater than 50,000. It's actually equal to. And then when we get to 82,000, which is in fact greater than 50,000, we want to do something. So what do we want to do? As we said before, we want to go and save it to our array. So we can say our array name, which is res, short for result, and we can use a method called push. And push just basically adds that element, or adds a element onto the array. So what exactly do we want to push? We want to push the salary at index whatever we're on currently. So that would be I. So I is a way that we can track what index of the array we're on. So we're going to push I. So you'll see for 25,000, for 32,000, for 50,000, this is not going to actually be executed, but for 82, 65, and 78 it will. So we can go and run this now, but we're not actually going to see any output, but we'll run it to see do we get any errors. We shouldn't get any errors, but we will not see any output. And as you can see down here in the console, we don't see any output, but that's expected because while we have added to the array, or at least we think we've added to the array, we haven't actually displayed anything, okay? So if we do a console log, and inside our console log, we put in what we want to display. So we want to display this res array. So if we go and run this again, we'll see that our output is 82, 65, 52, and 78. So that's perfect. That's what we would expect. And if we were to change this 50,000 to maybe let's say 40,000, like an example I said earlier on, and we go and run this, we can see that the array gets bigger. You can see 50,000 is actually added to the array this time, and you can see we've also got this 42,000 added to the array. So I'm just going to change this back to 50,000, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to comment this out, because we're going to do basically the equivalent of this, but using a filter method. So to do this, similar to our for each method in our previous video, we start off by stating what array we want to perform this operation on. So as you can see, salary up here is the array we want to perform our filter operation on. Then we say dot filter. Filter is a method, so we have to put 2 round brackets after it, and filter actually accepts in an additional function. Okay, so it's like a callback function. So we'll say function, and we'll have our opening curly brackets, and we'll pass in our parameter here now in a minute, but we won't worry about that for just a second. And now we're going to have another set of curly brackets, and within these curly brackets, this is going to be the operation or the check that we're going to do. So you see this if conditional statement that we checked for in our for loop. This is where we're going to have our if conditional statement. So we're going to say the exact same thing. If the salary is greater than 50,000, we want to do something. Now notice in this example, I'm saying salary here. And the reason why I'm saying salary is because this is going to be the parameter that's going to be passed in. So remember I said it takes a parameter. So I'm going to call that parameter salary, and I'll show you how you can change that name in a minute. But if the salary is greater than 50,000, we want to do something, right? So in our for loop, we push to an array, a new array. But in this example, we're not going to be pushing to any array. We're just going to return something, right? And we're just going to return true. And basically what happens here is we get a salary passed in, let's say, for example, 35,000 or whatever number, maybe 25,000. And if it's greater than 50,000, I'm going to return true. So I'm going to return it into that variable or that function that has called it. So this is a little bit different than, pushing to an array and then printing out an array and all this type of behavior. So if I go and run this now, we'll get a similar problem that we had before. We'll not see anything being displayed. So as you can see, we don't see anything being displayed, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's not working or it's not doing what we intended it to do. Now, to check this, we need to go and console log as well, right? But we can't go and console log our other array because we weren't pushing to an array. We actually have to assign a variable to this code here. So I could say let res, so we'll name it the same as our previous one, but you can see it's commented out, so it's not actually being considered as a variable, and we'll just say equals. So we now know that whatever the result of all this is, so whatever result we get from salary.filter will be put into result. So if I go and console log this result and I go up and try and run it, I can see that I get the exact same output. I get 82,000, I get 65,000, 52,000 and 78,000. Now, if you remember, I said this salary thing here could be changed. So rather than having salary, if we wanted to just put maybe S is short for salary, so we might want to do that. And if we go and run this, you'll see that we get the exact same output. Now, actually, a really cool thing that we can do is also use arrow functions. And if we use arrow functions with this, it can make our code a lot cleaner, it can make it a lot more readable, and it's quite powerful once you get the hang of it. Now, you might know about arrow functions, but if you do, this is how you would implement the filter method using an arrow function. So we get rid of this function keyword, we keep that S there, and we also get rid of these brackets. So we get rid of the two sets of curly brackets, we get rid of our if statement, and in here we put a fat arrow, and we get rid of this return statement as well. So as you can see, we're getting rid of a lot of things, and since we're only passing in S, so we're only passing in one parameter, we don't actually need these round brackets either, so we can get rid of these. And we'll bring that round bracket up to the next line, and now you can see that I've basically got my whole filter method all on one line, and it's pretty short. It's pretty nice. If you're not used to arrow functions, you might think it's a little bit complicated. You might think it's a little bit of magic. You don't quite know what's going on. Maybe the other way was better for you to actually understand it. But I just want to show you this way that it is possible to do. So if I go and run this solution now again, you can see the exact same result again. So as you can see, if you know how to use arrow functions along with these higher order methods in JavaScript, you can create really good quality code. That's all for this video. If you like the video, leave a like. If you want to see more, hit that subscribe button.